I watched Misery, which is a 1980 psychological thriller movie based on a Stephen King story. It's a classic. I've been meaning to watch it for a long time, and this weekend I got around to watching it. It's essentially the story about an author who has finished his latest novel while living in a cottage in a remote area somewhere. And as he drives back to town to submit his manuscript, he gets caught in a snowstorm. He gets rescued by somebody who turns out to be a stalker fan, like an absolutely fanatic, obsessed fan who finds out that he is her favorite author and that he's basically like captive to her because he's got his legs broken and like they're snowed in and stuff like that. And she basically tells him that she will call the hospital, once the roads are open again, but this might be weeks. And it then turns out that she's an absolute fan of his novel series that has just ended. And she is furious with the fact that he killed her favorite character. And she makes him write a new novel while recovering to kind of bring that character back and give that character a happy ending. And it's very intense. It's kind of basic. It's mostly two people in a room. It's a very intense performance from Kathy Bates as the fan, who is very nice 1 minute, and then the wrong thing can just set her off, and she becomes a complete psycho. And it's very much like an author kind of sticking it to his worst fans, right? There's some great symbolism in there. I'm not going to tell you how it ends, but there's a couple of scenes in there where I say, oh yeah, this is like he's venting some stuff, right? He's had run-ins with fans who are less than reasonable, and this is his way of telling them where to shove it. So it runs pretty much entirely on the performance of these two actors, and the thing just progresses very slowly and deliberately towards this confrontation where he basically has to string. It's almost like 1001 Nights, where he basically has to keep her interested long enough to formulate an escape plan, but that only works for so long because eventually he has to finish the novel, and then what then, right? That kind of thing, right? So it's basically this mind game between the author and the superfan. Because he's injured, he's at her mercy, but also he's kind of able to manipulate her by playing with her emotions and expectations and so on, right? So it's great. It's a great story, and it's just thrilling all the way through.
I saw movie posters. I think I saw like half of a trailer to this like time ago or like different periods in time, and I don't know why I never. I don't think there was enough in the trailer that made me want to go watch it. But obviously, after hearing your description of it, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna give it a shot because I'm gonna give it a shot.
Yeah, Stephen King is 50-50 for me. Some of his stuff I quite like, a lot of it I don't like.
mm,
And so I dislike a lot of his tropes and a lot of his stock characters and stuff like that. And I think this is almost like Stephen King for people who don't like Stephen King, because he doesn't do most of the things you probably dislike about him. At least that was kind of my experience. But yeah, it just stands really well on its own.
I'd say the best recent thing which I have seen this week was Dope Thief. It was a new Apple series. It's called Dope Thief. A new Apple series which just came out. So just like these two friends pretend to be DEA agents whenever they go on drug busts, just to rob the drug dealers, and then they end up robbing the wrong drug dealer, wrong person, and it just goes haywire from there. I'm on episode 2, I believe. So I don't know obviously how the story ends up progressing, but so far so good, really good. I'm actually surprised it came from Apple because it starts off good in the beginning, and I think with Apple series, which I tend not to like, it's a very slow build up, but this one I think it starts off interesting enough from the get go. So yeah, Dope Thief is definitely a new series which you guys should check out.
So this week I watched The Siege of Jadotville, which is a 2016 war movie about a UN mission, specifically Irish soldiers, who in the 1960s are dispatched to the Congo, where a civil war is going on. And this mostly deals with the details of their deployment, as well as a battle which happened in history where they got attacked by mercenaries and very narrowly survived that attack against overwhelming odds. And the movie essentially recounts the events of the lead up to that battle, the battle itself, and then the fallout from it, And also, it talks about the geopolitics of the Cold War a little bit, where these kind of naive soldiers are kind of thrown into this very complex. Like, if you've ever read up on the Congo Civil War in the 60s, it's a mess, right? It's like so many factions and so much chaos. And just even trying to get, like, even with 60 years of history, trying to get everything, all the details straight is a full time job. And these soldiers have essentially been thrown into the middle of that, and for them it's a matter of survival to figure it out. And they, going into it, don't even really know what their mission is. And the movie kind of follows their commanding officer, who kind of has to figure this out in real time. And if he gets it wrong, his men will not survive, probably because they have to know who to trust, and they have to know, what to expect, what people will do, and stuff like that. I don't think it's the most historically accurate thing ever. I think it broadly covers kind of the highlights, but it does a good job of showing kind of the pragmatism and how these conflicts are not really about good versus evil, because everybody just has their own interests and challenges and so on. And it really drove home that point quite well, better than a lot of war movies, which is mostly about either condemning or celebrating somebody. And here it's more like, look at this mess, right? That's kind of the bottom line of it. And I kind of, it's not the greatest movie ever, but it was a good watch. It's a solid war movie, but it's also interesting. Like, it's more about the UN than really about anything else, because that was one of the first big missions of the UN where it really didn't go well, and they underwent a lot of scrutiny afterwards. And this is kind of the context in which that happened. So I enjoyed the movie on that front.
I did manage to get into the new episode of Power Book 3, Raising Kanan. I think we're in season 3 or season 4, one of them. This is pretty much based on Kanan's character, which is a character in pretty much the whole Power universe. Daniel, I think you said you've seen a couple of episodes of Power.
I
Uh,
might have, but
yeah,
I don't.
but I don't think, I don't know if you got into it, but it was Power and Ghost. But yeah, this series is based on Kanan's story and pretty much how his rise to in the drug game pretty much comes about. And yeah, it's filled with family feuds, filled with shocking moments, filled with a lot of gangster stuff, man. It's the typical hood, American hood type of drama. I think it's in terms of like all the Power books I've seen, because there's Power Book One. Obviously, there's Power. There's Power Book Force, which is Tommy's story. There's Power Book. I don't know the numbers of it, but there's the Power Book with Tariq's story, and then there's Kanan's story. So yeah, the Kanan one out of all four, I'd say this one's probably third best. I'd say first is Power, then it's Tariq's Power Book, and then it's Kanan's one. Yeah, so Kanan's one is juicy, man. It's juicy and it's an engaging watch. It's an engaging watch. Because I think there's a lot of unexpected moments, a lot of snaky business going on, and it's always going to be like that. The ending where it's like a shell shock type of moment. So yeah, expect that. So I'd recommend that for you guys in case you haven't seen it.
So the best thing I watched this week is A Dark Song, which is a 2016 occult horror movie, which is essentially about two people who embark on an occult ritual. So this woman basically lost her child, and she wants to kind of get in touch with the spirit. And so she hires this occultist who basically is supposed to guide her through this ritual. And the entire movie is basically just them in an empty house in the countryside, kind of just going through the steps of this occult ritual, which takes weeks and weeks to do. And the mental strain and the psychological issues that go into that. And then over time, they kind of start, like, they have to cleanse themselves, and they have to study the right incantations in the right languages, and they have to create the right circumstances to break through to another, to the other side and stuff like that. There's basically two halves to it. The first one is, what if all of occult philosophy was real and all of these principles just applied? And how would somebody navigate that? A real person, how would they engage with that? How would they use that to get what they want, and what would the ramifications of that be? And then the second half of it is the psychology of this woman who has been unable to move on from the death of her son, and is basically resorting to this destructive behavior to kind of, because that's the only way she can deal with it. And then that's kind of the setup, and then the story kind of progresses from there, because once you start the ritual, you can't really stop it. It's basically carried by these two performances of the woman and this occultist she's hired, and just their interactions, and as they go through all of these different steps and ordeals and trials. And it's just, yeah, it's just a good watch. I watched a movie called The Booth at the End, which is a 2014 movie. It's kind of hard to summarize, but essentially what it is that there's a diner, and at the end of the diner, in the booth, is a guy, and people go to him to tell him about their problems, and he will give them a mission that's seemingly completely unrelated to what their problem is. And when they do that thing for him, they get what they want. So it's kind of a magical realism kind of thing where it's never explained who this guy is or why he can make stuff happen. But the entire movie is essentially just set in the diner, focused on this one booth, and there's parallel stories of maybe 6 people or so who come to the guy who sits in the booth at the end, and they tell him their problems, and then he sends them out to do something. They come back, they give updates, he says whether it's good enough or not, and what the next thing they have to do. And the entire thing is basically like this karmic justice kind of thing, where it's kind of asking the question of, okay, what would you be willing to do and willing to give up in order to get what you want? So, for example, there's a guy who, it's not really made clear who he hates, but there's some group of people he hates and he wants them all gone from the world. And the guy in the booth says, I can make them all disappear, but 7 random people have to die, and there have to be at least 20 witnesses, that sort of thing, right? He gives him like this challenge, essentially, and throughout the movie, the guy keeps coming back and gives updates as he is planning this killing spree, right? And you can kind of see, like the whole thing basically forces him to think his wishes through and think about what it would actually take and what that actually would look like and why he wants this and that sort of thing. And there's this other woman who does not love her daughter, and she wants to be able to accept her daughter for who she is. I think she has maybe a disability, or in some way is a disappointment to the mother, right? And so the guy promises that he will make her love her daughter if she disappears for a week. Just don't tell anybody, just leave. Just live as a homeless person somewhere, don't tell anybody. And so that forces her to put herself in the shoes of other people, how they would react if she were to just disappear. A lot of it is like told just in implication and alluding to things. Nothing is ever explained. But it basically, part of it is like this whole be careful what you wish for situation, where when people get what they want, it doesn't always take the shape that they want. But also it's about forcing them to confront themselves, essentially, through the tasks that they get. And it's like I think it's kind of like a mini series that got re-edited into a movie or something like that. It's a little bit confusing where exactly this comes from. But it's just really well acted. It's like 7 or 8 different actors who just talk, right? There's no other locations. They just have to talk about like their state of mind, essentially, and have to kind of explain to this mysterious guy what they want and why they want it and so on. And it's like there's just a brief glimpse into a couple of different people. And like it feels like it was at one point written as a theater play, where you could imagine just a couple of people standing on a stage talking about this. But so it's just entirely 100% character focused. And it's very small, it's very human, it's very personal. And I thought it was just like that premise was just really well done.
When did this come out?
2014.
2014. And it's called The Diners, you said?
The Booth at the End.
The Booth. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I completely found this completely at random somewhere in a recommendation. And I just watched it with no expectations whatsoever. And I just enjoyed myself. It's just a really well-written, very small, very personal story.
Is this Apple?
This is on Amazon Prime in the UK.
Amazon Prime.
It's not an Apple production.
Okay, cool.
I think it's like a TV series that at some point got bought out by a streamer or something like that. The whole background of this is pretty confusing. But right now it exists in as a movie on some streaming service or other.
Cool. I'm going to check that out. That sounds interesting. Let me check that out.
It's very reminiscent of like paranormal stories from like the 2000s, where just it's the real world, but there's just this one strange thing that never gets explained. But it puts people into interesting character moments and situations, and then you see what they do.